Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today we're going to be taking a look at 5 different Patrick Kane trades that can actually happen. Now, I missed a lot. Over the past week we've seen tons of rumors surrounding Patrick Kane, his situation with Chicago, a lot more updates surrounding him, and now at this point it seems extremely likely, not even just likely, that Patrick Kane will get dealt in the next year. But when it comes to the Patrick Kane trade rumors, which teams could potentially go after him and what could Patrick Kane trade look like? Watch till the end for all the breakdowns and all the mock trades, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new. 50% of you guys aren't subscribed, so if you like hockey content, this channel is the place to be. Now, when it comes to actually coming up with Patrick Kane mock trades and actually looking at which teams could be available, it's a really interesting situation since I think for most teams, there will have to be some salary retention involved with Patrick Kane at $10.5 million on the cap hit. Even though in some ways he could be worth that, a lot of teams right now, especially with how cap strapped they are going to have a tough time fitting this deal, which I think definitely changes what we will see in a Kane trade. But again, considering just how good he is still offensively, there's going to be so many teams, especially nearing the trade deadline, that will definitely want and even need him. But once again, we're going to go through 5 different NHL teams that I think maybe are the most likely, or the teams that I think will be in the end, especially around trade deadline time, try to go after Patrick Kane and what those deals could potentially look like. And as for the asking price for Kane, I think the starting baseline is a top prospect, probably a U25 player that Chicago thinks can contribute very nicely into the future, and a first round pick, especially in 2023. That's the baseline, but to me, I could see Chicago also wanting another big asset, another big younger asset, and possibly another maybe top 2 round pick as well, whether that be in 2023, 2024, or even 2025. I think Chicago will be willing to be patient, and especially if those picks maybe come down a couple of years ahead of time, I don't think Chicago is a team that is all that worried. We know that they're going full scorched earth, full rebuild, and I think that will translate to the Kane trade package. But let's start out today with the first NHL team that I think could end up trading for Patrick Kane, and maybe the team that's been rumored the most, especially over the past couple of weeks, is the Edmonton Oilers. And even though their cap situation is really not in a good spot to add a $10.5 million player, I still think there is quite a bit of assets there that the Blackhawks would love to have, and in a Patrick Kane trade, him alongside players like Connor McDavid would be magical. But when it comes to the actual trade itself, again, going back to that asking price where you want a top prospect, you want a solid young player, you want a first round pick, I think for the Oilers, they will have to give up just a bit more than that. And as for the actual trade package, the Oilers will get Patrick Kane, 50% retained. In exchange, the Blackhawks will get Kailer Yamamoto, Jesse Puljujarvi, Dylan Holloway, a 2023 first rounder, and a 2024 second rounder. Now, to me, I think this checks all the boxes for the Blackhawks, and I think this is a asking price and an offer that if Edmonton is willing to budge on, I think could get the deal done for sure. You got 2 younger players there, which I think in Yamamoto and Puljujarvi's case are mostly there to make the cap work. You are going to need a lot of work here, and even though Patrick Kane's deal, 50% retained, is $5.2 million, let's say they're at the cap floor with Mike Smith and of course Clefbaum on LTR next year. If you get rid of Yamamoto and Puljujarvi, you would just have enough to make the deal work, and of course you got top prospect in Dylan Holloway, you got a first rounder in 2023 and a second rounder on top of this. It would definitely hurt Edmonton's depth, no doubt about it, but if they're truly going to go for it, getting a player like Patrick Kane would make that Edmonton team even more scary, and for some, maybe the top contender in the West. But that's just the thing. I think for some people, they might look at the offer and say it's too low, but I think the reason why it is so low is because he is only signed for 1 year. For some teams, it might only be a rental. So I think for the Blackhawks, the most is what they could expect is this type of offer, getting 2 solid young players, a top prospect, a first, and a second. To me, if I'm Chicago, I would love that offer, and if I'm Edmonton truly going for it, I could see them making this deal around trade deadline time. But now let's go on to the second team and the second Patrick Kane trade that can actually happen. Let's move on to a team that's been linked to Kane really over the past couple of years now in the New York Rangers. Now, even though me personally, I would not go after Patrick Kane if I'm New York, it feels like this next year they're truly going to go for it, and Patrick Kane would be the best rental available, bar none, and would be really interesting alongside players like Chris Kreider, Mikas Zibanejad, and Artemi Panarin. Imagine Panarin and Kane again on a roster. That would be brilliant. As for the actual trade package itself, though, I see the New York Rangers getting Patrick Kane, 50% retained, which is an absolute must in my opinion. In exchange, the Blackhawks, though, will get former second overall pick Kaapo Kakko, Philip Hedl, Nils Lundqvist, and a 2023 first rounder. Now, it's kind of similar to what we saw in the Edmonton package. You got two really interesting young players. You got a top prospect in Nils Lundqvist and a first rounder on top of this. I don't feel like the Rangers would have to give up another pick on top of the first rounder because you got more quality, in my opinion, in Kaapo Kakko and Hedl. Hedl especially, I think, would be really interesting in Chicago, and Kakko in a new situation and a lot more opportunity, I think could do really, really well. And then you got Nils Lundqvist, who is almost the exact same way, but in terms of prospects, he's a guy that is waiting to burst onto the scene and just needs that shot, and Chicago's going to have a lot of roster space next year. So I could see this working out for both sides, and for the Rangers, if they do get close to the cup, if they get to the final two, if they even win the thing, then this trade seems like an absolute steal. But just like in the Edmonton trade, Kakko and Hedl are also there to make the cap work, so Chicago might be in a situation where they might want more just pure futures, and this trade might not cut it, so we'll really have to see what around trade deadline time they truly go for, but I think this package could be really interesting for them. But now we go on to the third Patrick Kane trade that can actually happen, and another suitor that in my opinion will be really interesting in the Kane sweepstakes in the LA Kings. Now, they did get their number one right wing in Kevin Fiala this last offseason, but I could see if LA's in a prime position, if they're maybe first in the division, if they're maybe like in a great spot right at trade deadline time, I could see them maybe not being content and going after Patrick Kane in a deal. Now, going to the trade itself, for the LA Kings, they will get Patrick Kane, 50% retained, but I think this might be one of the more interesting offers and potential trades we could see. To the Chicago Blackhawks, they will get Victor Arvidsson, who I think will be traded probably later on, maybe as soon as this trade happens. I don't think Arvidsson is going to be a key piece for this Blackhawks team. He's just a part of this to make the cap work. But then you got Arthur Kaliyev, a 2023 first rounder, and a 2025 third round pick. Now, to me, this also checks quite a bit of boxes. It might not be as young of an offer as the New York Rangers or the Edmonton Oilers can give, but if they're just going for true futures, I think LA has a pretty good case here. You got Arthur Kaliyev, who in my opinion is an extremely underrated young player, has already fit in so well offensively while providing much better defense than I ever thought he would be, would have at the NHL level. And then you got a first round pick in 2023 and a third rounder in 2025. And again, you also have to factor in what you could get for Victor Arvidsson in the trade that Chicago would likely later make. So I think for this deal, it would be interesting. I think Chicago, especially in a trade package to LA, would have a lot to want back. But I think Arthur Kaliyev as maybe a corner piece isn't the worst thing in the world, and I think in Chicago he would do pretty great things there. Now, it might be a little bit low, but again, all depends on if Chicago is fine and good with later trading on Victor Arvidsson and getting assets back from that deal. But now moving on to the fourth Patrick Kane trade that can actually happen. This trade really all depends on Chicago's mindset, and this might be my hottest take of the video, but just bear with me. Let's think for a second. Let's say that Chicago wants the best package available no matter what, and even if it means sending him to the Central Division, they will take the best offer available. To me, I think the team that would be the most interesting to trade for Kane would be the Minnesota Wild. Now, the problem is with Kane's no-move clause, does he want to go to Minnesota? We'll have to see, but if Minnesota's in a strong position, if they're maybe first in the Central, I could see Kane saying, okay, this might be my best chance to truly win. Maybe he thinks that. We'll end up seeing. But to me, I think with Kane, even though there has been some bad blood there, if he does waive that no-move clause, and if Chicago is fine with trading him in the Central Division, Minnesota might be the team that is able to give maybe the most amount of stuff that Chicago would specifically want. As for the trade, if it were to happen, I see the Minnesota Wild getting Patrick Kane, 50% retained. In exchange, the Blackhawks get Tyson Jost, Matthew Boldy, a 2023 first rounder, and defensive prospect Ryan O'Rourke. Now, here's the thing. I think for Minnesota, trading Boldy would be a huge move. And I think Boldy is maybe the best player, maybe best prospect, maybe best young player the Blackhawks could get in a trade. It would be an amazing deal to be able to get him. You also land Tyson Jost, who can play NHL time already, and you get a first round pick on top of that, and defensive prospect Ryan O'Rourke, who I think is pretty underrated and could fit into maybe a fifth or fourth D-man role someday. But really, Matthew Boldy is the true cornerstone piece, and I think in a deal, Minnesota might be able to give that up. And let's say it is around trade deadline time. If Matthew Boldy is playing decently, I could see Minnesota being able to get rid of him. But let's say he is in that top tier, he's around a point per game again, I think it might be a little bit less likely, but still at the same time, again, if Chicago wants to trade in the Central, if Matthew Boldy is available, I think they say yes. But now going on to the fifth Patrick Kane trade that can actually happen, let's go on to a team that I think is a lot more realistic to actually go for Patrick Kane. And this is interesting because I don't really see many people talking about this team in the potential Patrick Kane sweepstakes, but that is the Calgary Flames. To me, I think the Calgary Flames make a lot of sense. They got a decent amount of cap space right now at 2.1, I believe. So they'll have more space than teams like Edmonton or the New York Rangers to be able to get a deal done by trade deadline time. And we know that Calgary is loading up for everything. They've, of course, made the Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar trades. They have signed Nazem Kadri. This is a Calgary Flames team that wants to take that next bigger step this next year and truly be one of the main contenders in the West. And to me, adding Patrick Kane would make them, alongside Edmonton and Colorado, the biggest competition in the West if it truly goes that way. And to me, I think for Calgary, if we're around trade deadline time, I think they'd be one of the most willing teams to go after a pure rental in Kane and give up the most for him. The problem is that the Flames don't have nearly as much younger or prospect talent in their pool as teams like maybe the Minnesota Wild or even the LA Kings, but I do think they can still make it work in terms of the quantity. If Chicago wants to go for more quantity, more assets in a Patrick Kane deal, I think the Flames would be one of the most interesting options out there. Now again, the Calgary Flames would get Patrick Kane 50% retained, but the Blackhawks would end up reacquiring Nikita Zadorov to make this deal work. And then you got the prospect haul, Jacob Pellichet, you got Rory Cairns, Jeremy Poirier, 2023 first rounder, and a 2024 third rounder. Even though there isn't anybody maybe as good as Matthew Boldy there, Pellichet is pretty underrated. You got Cairns there, who I think is also a really underrated prospect and just got over 100 points in the OHL this last year, and Poirier, who is developing his offensive game really, really nicely. To me, I think for the Blackhawks, Calgary makes a lot of sense as a suitor, and I think especially, again, a Pellichet, a first round pick, a third rounder especially, which I think is an important piece of this deal. I could see this deal getting done, and I could see Chicago accepting it and Calgary really going after Kane in the meantime. But those are my Patrick Kane mock trades. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys agree and disagree with these mock trades? Which you think is the most likely one, which you think is the least likely one, and let me know your mock trades as well. What could your team give up for Patrick Kane? Which team do you see getting Patrick Kane in the end? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Of course, share this video with your friends, get it to all the hockey fans you guys know online, and click on this card for all my Trading Room content right away on the playlist. My name is Nathan. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.